For centuries, the Sava River has been collecting the abundant waters of the Alps and the Balkans, blazing bravely a trail down the bed of the Pannonian Sea, rushing on to meet the Blue Danube. 50 kilometers before disappearing in the Danube's embrace, at the villages of Obrež and Kupinovo, it still meanders as if in an attempt to stave off, for as long as possible, its inevitable disappearance in the Danube. Its changing course created undulating alluvial plains, marshland dotted with ponds, meanders, swamp thickets, wet meadows. A veritable bird paradise. The unique relief, soil, microclimate, and hydrological conditions all combine to create a lush vegetation and an abundance of wildlife, thus creating the Obetska-Bara marshlands, a gem of the southern Srem region, a landscape painted with the flight of herons and storks. The earliest official conservation measures for the area date back to 1874, when the Habsburg monarchy passed a decree on the protection of Obetska-Bara as a game preserve of the Austrian royal family. In 1919, the marsh became the game preserve of the Karađorđević dynasty. In 1977, under the Ramsar Convention, this area was put on the International Register of Marshes, and somewhat later it was given the status of an important bird area, the IBA. Today, in Serbia, Obetska-Bara, with its 9,820 hectares of wetlands and forests along the river Sava, straddling the municipalities of Pećinci and Ruma, has the status of a special nature reserve. It is managed by Vojvodina Šume Company, with generous assistance from the Nature Conservation Institute, the competent Vojvodina Secretariat, and the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Obetska-Bara is an authentic combination of brackens, ponds, pits, swamp vegetation, wet meadows and forests, with extremely rich and diverse ecosystems. It is horseshoe-shaped. It runs 13.5 kilometers long down an old riverbed abandoned by the Sava River more than 2 millennia ago, when it took its present route. This horseshoe-shaped meander throws a loop around most of the reserve and, at high waters, reaches up to 750 meters in width. It is about 7 meters deep at its deepest end. The horseshoe is 4 kilometers wide from east to west and 5 kilometers from north to south. It is completely filled with water only after heavy rains and when the level of the Sava River is very high. The marshes are fed by the surface waters of the Sava, subterranean and atmospheric waters. It is drained by surface and subterranean rivers and by evaporation. During periods of great drought, water lingers only in pits in the deepest parts of the marsh. The biggest of the pits is Obrežko Okno, also known as Krstonosisa Okno, outside the village of Obrež. It is up to 40 meters wide and over 1,000 meters long. Obetska-Bara is connected with the Sava River by the Vok channel at Kupinovo. When the Sava is low, water from the marshes are usually drained through the channel and into the river. When the waters are high, the channel is a conduit that feeds Obetska-Bara with waters from the river Sava. The waters of the Sava flow into Obetska-Bara also from the west, when the ponds and depressions between Grabovac and Obrež fill up and overflow into the Obetska-Bara through the Revenica channel, turning the marshes into an active channel of the Sava River through which the water flows freely, flooding even the highest elevations of the reserve. The reserve lies in a forest steppe vegetation zone characterized by water, marsh, pond, meadow and forest vegetation. It has an abundance of flora and fauna, of rare and endangered species of national and international importance. There are numerous sensitive ecosystems, especially wetlands and ancient forests of common oak. Continuous nature research has produced a plethora of papers on the reserve's richly diverse plant and animal life. The reserve's greatest wealth is its bird population. In recent history, there have been 222 species of birds registered in this area, about 140 of which are nesting birds, and the rest are migratory birds, transits and wintering birds. The colony of waterfowl is one of the greatest attractions and features of Obecka Bara, at present comprising up to 800 nesting pairs of 8 species of herons and cormorants. The reserve provides shelter also for many international endangered species and birds that are rare species in Serbia. The rare birds in this area include spoonbills, yellow herons, auks and white-tailed sea eagles, of which there are only a few pairs remaining. The most valuable groups of birds that can be seen in Obecka Bara are certainly the marsh birds, herons and storks, as well as birds of prey, which are especially numerous and diverse in the centennial oak forests. In the villages of Kupinovo and Obrež, situated right on the banks of the Obecka Bara marsh, nest up to 35 pairs of white storks. Also, in the old and inaccessible forests, there are about 18 pairs of black storks. This has put Obecka Bara on the list of the most important areas for the preservation of these two species of stork in Serbia. There are 26 species of birds of prey. In the villages of Obecka Bara and in adjacent fruit orchards, one can observe dark-breasted barn owls, little owls and long-eared owls. A special feature of Obecka Bara are singing birds, which nest in large forests, both inside and all around the reserve. Obecka Bara is home also to 50 species of mammals: the wild boar, the otter, the jackal, wildcat, pine marten, the deer, and of lately the beaver. There are 13 species of amphibians and 11 species of reptiles, including the rarest of snakes, the common adder. The reserve has more than 250 species of insects and about 200 species of zooplankton. The spreading floodlands of the Obecka Bara Reserve are natural hatching grounds for 16 species of the Sava river fish and their necessary feeding ground. Some of the most important fish species are pike, loach and carp. This comparatively small area comprises a number of different natural environments, various biotopes where a diverse plant life has developed. The rich flora includes about 500 species of plants, 180 species of fungi, and 50 species of moss. Remnants of fragile marsh ecosystems comprise communities of white and yellow water lilies, water soldiers, water mint, willows, sweet flags, and other rare species. Also to be found are sub-endemic species of plants. The most important forest ecosystems include communities of the common oak with the ash and elm. The Debela Gora forest, which is over 300 years old and covering an area of about 320 hectares, all covered with giant common oak trees, is unparalleled in Europe, and as such it has been strictly protected for decades. It has become home to some species of insects and fungi that live nowhere else in our country, Europe or the rest of the world. The importance and diversity of the bird colonies are the results of the wealth of habitats and feeding grounds. The habitats are located in an ecological sequence of belts, from water and marsh at small elevations to meadows, shrubs and forests on higher ground. However, The relief of Obecka Bara, with its ridges and depressions, has created ecosystems that alternate and intertwine together on a comparatively small area, giving special importance to this reserve as against other marsh ecosystems in our region. The rich nature of Obecka Bara is complemented by the area's outstanding cultural and historical importance. Man has inhabited these parts continuously for millennia, from the New Stone Age, Neolithics, to the present day. Inside Obecka Bara, on the banks of the marsh and immediate hinterland, there are about 30 registered archaeological sites. There has been no systematic digging done here, but an abundance of artifacts found on the surface testifies to continuous human habitation. The finds date to all phases of prehistory, with several sites suggestive of a rich Roman period. The best preserved and most important from the viewpoint of national history and culture are certainly finds dating back to the Middle Ages. 3 localities are first-rate Serbian medieval heritage, going well beyond Srem's local and regional importance. The town of Kupinik, located on the very edge of the southern path of the horseshoe, was built as a Hungarian military fortification in the 14th century. After the fall of Smederevo in the mid-15th century, it became the refuge of the Branković dynasty of despots, its royal residence and the capital of Serbia. The city had 5 towers, each of them 16 meters high. The ramparts were 8 meters high and surrounded on all sides with a moat which was connected to the Sava River by the Vok Channel. Kupinik was ruled by despot Stefan Lazarević and his successor Đurađ Branković. The city was also the residence of Vuk Grgurević, known as the fire-breathing dragon. Also, Stefan Branković's widow, the Saint Mother Angelina, and her sons George and Jovan lived here. Kupinik was sacked by Turks, and so the seat of the Branković in Srem, the Free Serbian country, was destroyed and ceased to exist in 1521. About 250 meters east of the ruins of the ancient city, at the entrance to the village of Kupinovo, is the church of St. Luke. It is believed that the church was endowed by Đurađ Branković and that at one time it housed the relics of St. Luke the Evangelist, after whom it was named. The church was first mentioned in writing in 1486, when it received the relics of Stefan Branković, which makes it without any doubt Orthodox Christianity's oldest preserved church north of the Sava and Danube. St. Luke's church was plundered by the Turks in 1521, at the same time as the town of Kupinik, yet it was rebuilt in the second half of the 18th century. The pride of place in the church is held by the iconostasis, the icon screen, the work of Jacob Orphelin dating from the 18th century. The church of Mother Angelina is situated on the great island in Obecka Bara, 500 meters west of the village of Kupinovo. It is one of the oldest Serbian wooden frame churches, and it has stood in the grounds of the Obet monastery for centuries. According to one local legend, the Obet monastery church was built by despot Stefan's widow, Angelina Branković, in 1486 in gratitude to the Lord for her safe arrival. The church was a wooden frame building from timber from the ship on board of which she had arrived in Kupinovo together with her sons and carrying the relics of her husband. A document has been preserved showing that the Church of the Annunciation at Obet was ordered to be built from oak logs by hieromonk Maxim, former Serbian despot George Branković in 1501. Early in the last century, the church had been in ruins, but it was rebuilt from solid material and consecrated again in 2007. Adjacent to Obecka Bara and those historic localities, we find the village of Kupinovo, one of the most beautiful villages in the region of Srem. It has authentic architecture, restaurants, and there are flocks of storks that have been nesting here for centuries. Kupinovo has preserved original pieces of folk architecture, which today represent a valuable ethnographic legacy, and they're all protected architectural complexes. The Ethno Park comprises 9 estates, all complete with vegetable patches, flower gardens and a churchyard. The centerpiece of the protected complex is the Ethno House, the home of the family Putnik, built in the early 19th century. Throughout its long history, Obecka Bara has been a veritable sanctuary for wildlife and a rich source of information for numerous researchers, scientists and lovers of nature. Its proximity to Belgrade's Nikola Tesla Airport, arterial roads and large towns, its natural and cultural landmarks, all combine to provide limitless tourist possibilities for the reserve. Every August, Obecka Bara plays host to an international work and research camp which rallies young people from practically all continents of the world. Thousands of students and pensioners visit the reserve on organized one-day study trips. However, the tourist potential of Obecka Bara and the cultural and historical landmarks of Kupinovo have not been fully tapped. This has primarily been due to the area's insufficient public exposure and inadequate tourist infrastructure. The only accommodation is to be had at the Obecka Bara Hotel in Obrež, which has long ago succumbed to the depredations of time. In recent years, steps have been taken to rectify this. A network of tourist footpaths and vantage points has been built and information boards are being put up. Also, the first tourist study map of Obecka Bara is under preparation for the use of the general public. Obecka Bara has a unique blend of natural and cultural resources, giving the local community a greater opportunity for sustainable development, at the same time preserving its identity and tradition. The abundance of wildlife species and landscapes, the cultural and historical landmarks of Kupinovo village, which has also a geothermal spring of high-temperature water, provide all a high potential for developing eco and ethnotourism, particularly through school field trips, organized camps, research workshops and finally family outings. Ecotourism has become very popular in the world today, taking the form of birdwatching tourism as well as the classical forms of hunting, fishing and leisure boating tourism. For the last century and a half, each generation has been facing the civilizational and national question as to how to preserve and protect Obecka Bara. One of the most important protected natural complexes in Serbia, it was highly endangered by human neglect and the passage of time few decades ago. The main problems included the receding of the marsh, the shrinking of the wet meadows, the encroachment of forests, the planting of poplar plantations, air and water pollution, unauthorized urbanization, and the use of harmful chemical substances in agriculture. One should stress the importance of the diverse vegetation and the balances of marsh, forest, shrub, wet meadows as unique ecosystems that keep the natural balance necessary for the preservation of the unique flora and fauna found in the Obecka Bara. Disrupting any segment of these ecosystems would endanger the whole, as well as each one of the about 2,000 registered species of plant and animal life. Watercourse regimen has been disrupted by human activity, blocking of the Ravenica channel, which feeds the marsh, and the excessive dredging of the Vok channel, which drains it, as well as the building of dams on the Sava River. Also, the level of subterranean waters have dwindled. Long years of poor inflow of water into the marsh have resulted in pits and wetlands drying up. Rank vegetation collects silt deposits which slowly fill up the marsh. Silt, in turn, enriches the water with nutrients, resulting in plants expanding. The change in hydrology changes the microclimate, and many irreplaceable species in the food chain disappear or migrate to other habitats. The reeds increasingly squeeze out the water lilies, while in the reed patches the woody species are on the increase. Water turns to marsh, then to wetland, and finally to forest. As a result, Obetska bara is disappearing. Its symbol for centuries, the Ibis, has not regularly inhabited the marshy area between Obrež and Kupinovo since the 60s, owing to receding waters and the encroachment of forests on wet meadows which were its feeding grounds. The main measure for preserving and enhancing this gem of nature would be to regulate the watercourse regimen, to build dams on the Vok and Revenica channels that would keep water in Obetska bara at a constant level and permanently prevent drainage and overgrowth, and also to revitalize the wet meadows and grazing fields while increasing the area under natural mixed forests at the expense of plantations of hybrid poplars. The efforts of the competent national institutions and organizations to secure the vitally needed experts and funds for the conservation of Obetska bara should be in keeping with the international importance of this unique and irreplaceable gem of nature under the Ramsar Convention. The reserve as a gem of nature must become a national obligation of the first importance, a duty of the Serbian state. It is necessary to provide financial and personal support for the existing project of revitalization of the wet meadows that has been yielding good results in the past few years. The national and international professional public should be mobilized and the project drawn up for the reserve's conservation, sustainable development and financial self-sufficiency through promoting modern tourism. Some of indispensable projects should include building tourist infrastructure, museums and exhibition rooms, devising educational and recreational programs, and so on. Joint efforts and a desire to recapture the erstwhile unity of man and nature on this great expanse of land could restore to Obetska bara some of its old glory, to the benefit of all who live there. Much needs to be done before we can be positive that every fall, when the white bird leaves on its winter trip, the people of Kupinovo and Obrež could say with confidence, as they have been saying in the past millennia, our storks will return. Before we can be sure that someday, from the south, there will fly in the old large flocks of birds of paradise that for centuries had been the hallmark of the Obetska bara, and that we will be able to say with a song in our hearts, the Ibis has returned.